In October of the year 2000, a Canadian sea exploration company was sailing Cuban waters. Its mission? Treasure. Lost treasure, to be exact, from sunken Spanish galleons, along with other scientific studies along the way. One early Caribbean day, the group came upon a remarkable find, laying on the bottom of the ocean. The company, by the use of side-scan sonar, had detected unusual readings that indicated this was not just an open sea floor, but there was what looked like a ship's hull. Excited, they quickly sent down their remote robot. The rover eventually came upon a sunken ship off the coast of Havana, Cuba, over 3,000 feet under the beautiful clear ocean. The rover was well equipped with the latest technology and sent back amazing live footage to the mothership above. The dark scene was illuminated by the submersive powerful lights and revealed the outline of a ship. But this was no Spanish galleon. It was the USS Maine. The USS Maine was a catalyst that sent the United States into the Spanish-American War. So how did the ship end up here? The steamship was said to have come under a sneak attack while it was docked in Havana Harbor in February of 1898. A mysterious explosion caused the death of 266 American sailors. The ship cost over $2 million and was sent to Cuba to protect American interests against Spain. The American public was outraged. This perceived attack ushered the U.S. to war against Spain. This became the Spanish-American War. Alas, as time went by, the war ended, and the ship was still there, partially sunken in the Havana harbor. But in the year 1911, it was raised, tugboated, then scuttled out far to sea with a proper ceremony. She sank to the bottom of the ocean and lay wait to finally be rediscovered. Initially, upon discovery, the shipwreck was a mystery. But after careful evaluation of the video, they discovered that the ship had no propeller and it was missing its bow, just as the USS Maine was missing its bow and propeller when they scuttled it. They were certain this was the USS Maine, although it was far away from where it was originally scuttled, as it must have drifted in the sea current. They notified the press. The press wanted to know who these people were who made this historic find. The group who made the discovery of the Maine were called the ADC, Advanced Digital Communications. They were one of 4 groups who were hired by Fidel Castro to scour Cuban waters for lost treasure ships. The ADC of all the groups had the potential to go to the furthest depths. The ADC was led by Paulina Zalitsky, who was a Russian-born marine engineer who was from Odessa, Ukraine. She was from a lineage of seafarers. She specialized in, among other things, submarine bases. She worked in Cuba during the Cold War and was able to defect with her small children to Canada. While in Canada, Paulina quickly adapted to her new surroundings and began several technical jobs, until finally, after meeting her husband, Dr. Paul Weinswag, they started the ADC along with her son, Ernesto Tapanez. In Cuba, the project was called the Exploramore. Exploramore was a Bahama-based company that worked in conjunction with the University of South Florida and the National Geographic magazine. The group was also joined by an underwater archaeologist from Florida State University. It was important to make it clear that none of the ship would be disturbed. The wreck was being observed and recorded. Excited, Paulina stated to the press that she hoped her company, Advanced Digital Communications, want to become the deep water experts off Cuba. The Maine is a historic war memorial and remains property of the United States government, but any booty found in any other areas would be shared by the company and the Cuban government. The ADC was finding dozens and dozens of wrecks. They were locating Spanish galleons, as all Spanish ships for hundreds of years had to dock at Havana Harbor while making their journey across the Atlantic Ocean. Paul Weinswag noted that they were finding these wooden ships still intact, as the conditions of the sea environment allowed for the wrecks to remain whole in a lot of cases. It was July of 2001 when the group was making their way back through the Guanahasabibes Peninsula, which is located in northwestern Cuba. There, they were scanning the wide open swaths of empty seafloor as if it were an underwater desert. Then suddenly came square after square perpendicular shapes. It was as if they were in an airplane looking down at a city from above, what looked like structure after structure, with roads in between. The anomaly was still there. The group had first discovered this amazing anomaly in July of 2000. The entire day of discovery was strange, as when they had first come upon the site, they encountered a submarine. Paulina Zalitsky said, "We saw a huge submarine, very large. We don't know whose submarine this was." Then the submarine disappeared just as quickly as it came. Now the group had returned with their own submarines, their deep-sea rover, and later a deep-sea dredger. First they sent down the rover, and the rover's cameras confirmed the presence of huge blocks, some stacked on each other, square and pyramid-shaped. Later, the dredger was sent down, and it brought back samples, mineral and organic. But most intriguing of all, some of the stone walls had inscriptions on them. The large anomalous area made up a dimension of 8 square miles. Paulina chuckled, saying maybe it was a huge underwater submarine terminal, like International Airport, very large. They gave the apparent sunken plateau the name Mega. This was because of the numerous huge megalithic stones that comprised the site, which rested at a depth of 2,200 feet below the ocean surface. Paul Weinswag stated that it could be the remains of a 6,000-year-old submerged city. Some of the structures within the complex may be as long as 440 yards wide and 44 yards tall. The precise age of the site is still unknown, although Cuban archaeologists excavated a land-based megalithic structure on the western coast of Cuba in 1966 that was close to the new underwater discovery. It was said to date from 4000 BC. Based on that and other geological information, we are speculating that this site is 6,000 years old. It's not exact, but it's very ancient. The ADC brought an anthropologist and a geologist aboard. The geologist was named Manuel El Torrate. Manuel was from the National Museum of Natural History, Havana, Cuba. His thoughts were that they are very unique structures. They really are not easy to understand, and I do not have an easy explanation for them in a natural geological process. Manuel was also mystified by 2 barnacles they had identified with the submersible. The barnacles were attached to a rock. Those were rose hip barnacles. Those barnacles should not be at those depths. Those are the kind that attach to the bottom of boats. It didn't seem to fall to the bottom of the ocean, as when they attempted to bring the rock back to the surface, one of the barnacles fell off. Manuel's early observation was that since Cuba lies on several tectonic plates, at the rate Cuba is moving in order to be above the surface of the ocean in that area of land, it would have had to have been 50,000 years ago. He also added that a sample of volcanic rock found at the site strongly suggested the site was once above water. Yet 50,000 years ago, there wasn't the architectural capacity in any cultures we know to build complex buildings. However, there were local legends of the Maya and the Yucatos, telling of an island that was once inhabited by their ancestors that vanished beneath the waves. The anthropologist was Gambino La Rosa of the Cuban Museum of Natural Sciences. Gambino was brought on as an expert advisor to study the apparent inscriptions. John Ekev, the senior editor of the National Geographic magazine, came to Cuba to study the images. He said, "They are interesting anomalies, but until we are able to get down there and see it, they will be hard to characterize. We are talking to the ADC and have interest in their project, but at this point, we haven't dotted the I's and crossed the T's." Paulina was invited to speak at the University of Veracruz by the Director of Anthropology Department, Dr. Roberto Ramirez Rodriguez. Roberto had recently completed a book called Atlanticu, The Origin of the El Tajín. The book was based on Mesoamerican legends of, according to an oral history, a tall race of white people who shared knowledge of architecture and mathematics and astronomy. These people were said to have come from an island in the east that sunk in a cataclysmic earthquake. Paulina also met with the official Amerindian chronicler of the Veracruz province, who had been excavating ancient temples for 65 years. He confirmed the similarities between the sonar images and the video images of the mega site and the layout of other ancient sites he had excavated. Once again, the ADC was making news around the world. Their discovery was featured by the BBC News, Washington Post, and the Tampa Bay Times, amongst other news organizations. Paulina Zalitsky and Paul Weinswag gave exclusive interviews with researcher Linda Moulton Howe of Earth Files in 2001.
Is there any thing that you can say on the record for radio this morning that I could do some kind of an update?
For the record, you can say that the Center for Marine Archaeology and Anthropology at the Cuban Academy of Sciences is currently analyzing video data which we have from the perimeter of the site from megalithic stones. They're working on inscriptions that they have detected on these stones, and they are analyzing them at this time.
And what are the estimated sizes of these stones?
The estimated sizes of these stones, they're roughly, they could be roughly about 2 by 5 meters.
2 by 5.
Very large stones.
And
that's about 6 feet by 15 feet, 16 feet, something like that.
And you mentioned possibly the same kind of look as the perimeter stones at Stonehenge, that kind of looking rectangular?
Yeah, the same kind of stone that you see on Easter Island, in Stonehenge. Very large and smooth and light-colored. That bear no, as I say, bear no relationship to the surrounding ecology, and also there's evidence of smooth cut and fit. Smooth cut and fit. That is one on top of another. You know, as if it were a basis of a pyramid or a large building.
And on those stones, where are the possible inscriptions? Up, like top or bottom or middle, or?
Well, they're not anywhere specific on the stones. These inscriptions, they could be in the middle of the stones, various parts of the stones, across. One thing we found, the anthropologists found, was an American cross. It's a Central American cross.
Is that where two lines are crossed? Perpendicular to each other with anything special on the ends, or
no? They're not two lines. They're two oval shapes crossing each other.
Two sort of long ovals crossing each other, the way a cross crosses.
Yeah, like a cross crosses, only the shape, not a single line. It's a flattened circle.
Do these, so far, from what you've seen on the video, do they seem to be inscribed into the stone like a quarter of an inch or a half an inch, or do you have any sense of how deep?
I can't tell really. We don't. They're limited lighting and limited perspective as well, because of the. We had technical problems with the ROV that we couldn't...
It's really dark at a half mile down, isn't it?
Well, there's no light at all,
yeah,
except what we provide.
And so you're limited in only what you can get in that light in front of you. And
that's okay. We have good lighting now, and we have a low light camera to add to our two or three other cameras that we have there as well. To our zoom camera, we have several cameras work down there, and we have good lighting, so there's no reason. There was a lot of debris in the water at that time, created by a strong current, probably plankton. So,
when do you think you're going to be able to go down with all the cameras and everything functioning?
Well, hopefully, if we get all our systems back together again. Within the next 2 months.
Dean Clark, a computer specialist, took the ADC sonar pictures of the megasite and rendered them into a 3D picture. This picture was considered an artistic interpretation. startling picture, along with the possible groundbreaking historical find, began to cast doubts on the validity of the claims of the ADC. Robert Ballard, the man who rediscovered the RMS Titanic and who was the National Geographic's resident expert and professor of oceanography, said, "That's too deep. I'd be surprised if it was human." You have to ask yourself, how did it get there? I've seen a lot of side scan pictures in my day, and it can be sort of like looking at an ink blot. People can sometimes see what they want to see. Archaeologist Keith Fitzpatrick Matthews later said, "We have some interesting sonar images that are basically like ink blot tests. They need interpreting, and the interpretation is entirely dependent on the preconception and biases of those looking at them." Paulina Zalitsky was predisposed to see artificiality because that's what she was being paid to do, even if the artificiality she was specifically interested in involved sunken ships. And Michael Fott, the ADC's expert in underwater archaeology from Florida State University, shared the same skepticisms. He said it would be cool if Zalitsky and Weinswag were right, but it would be real advance for anything we would see in a new world for that time frame. The structures are out of time and out of place. To continue further expeditions to the mega site, the ADC needed $9 million to cover the cost of their operation. The group were openly seeking investors. Ultimately, it was not enough money to continue their research, as much was lost when the National Geographic magazine backed out of their initial willingness to fund the operation. No other expeditions have ever been made to the site they call Mega. Okay, that's a mask. Look at this. That's a mask. They green screened that. Oh my god. They masked that out. Holy shit. What the